Good evening. The December 12, 2017 regular meeting of the Mentor Exempted Village Board of Education is hereby called to order. This meeting is being held in accordance with Section 3313.15 of the Ohio Revised Code. Mr. Wilson, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Briner?
Here.
Ms. Miller?
Here.
Mr. Shaw?
Here.
Mr. Tuttle?
Here.
Ms. Jisling?
Present. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would like to welcome everyone to the December 12, 2017 regular meeting of the Mentor Exempted Village Board of Education. Prior to this evening, each board member has received for their review and consideration the agenda and materials associated with each agenda item for the board's approval via the district's paperless Board of Education agenda system, Board Docs. The public can access the agenda through the school district's website. The agenda is available through the school district's website for public viewing the Sunday prior to the board meeting. Board members have the opportunity to call the superintendent and chief financial officer for information concerning agenda items and to request, if needed, additional information. There are two places on the agenda when the board entertains comments from the community. The first hearing of the public is dedicated to those who wish to address the board on agenda items only. The second hearing of the public is dedicated to those who wish to address the board on any subject, whether it is an agenda item or another issue. When addressing the board, please state your name. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Please address questions to the president. This meeting is being televised on a delayed basis and will be shown on Spectrum Cable Channel 1026 in Mentor and Channel 1025 in Mentor on the Lake. This meeting is also being videotaped and will be shown on our YouTube channel, Cardinal TV Mentor, Ohio. Please place your mobile telephones on silent mode during the meeting. Do we have a motion for approval of the minutes for the regular board meeting from November 21st and special board meetings for November 29th and December 7th?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Wilson, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Briner?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Ms. Jisling?
Yes. At this point, we have a hearing of the public on any agenda items. Thank you. And now to the superintendent's report and recommendations, please. Mr. Porter?
Thank you. Good evening, Madam President, members of the board. I have the following recommendations listed under the consent agenda and recommend approval of items 5A1 through 5A3.
So moved.
Second. And Mr. Wilson, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Briner?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Ms. Jisling?
Yes.
Madam President and members of the board, at this time I would like to invite Mr. Casella and Ms. Miller to recognize the student athletes of the Mentor High School cross-country team as state qualifiers.
That's good.
Madam President, members of the board, Mr. Porter and Mr. Wilson, it's my pleasure to be here to recognize members of our boys cross-country team who this past November qualified and competed in the state cross-country meet in Columbus. The boys team had a solid season this year, competing in some of the most competitive meets in the state. The boys defended their district title by winning this year's district championship in Madison, qualifying them for the regional tournament. At the Boardman Regional, the competitive season they had paid off as they got one of the qualifying spots to the state meet. The boys ran some of their best times of the year at the state meet and represented Mentor High School very well. Unfortunately, head coach Bill Dennison couldn't be here with us tonight, but I would like to recognize and bring up the members of the boys cross-country team who could be with us here this evening. Junior Andrew Chase. Andrew here? Nope. Senior Michael Farrow. Michael was also named to the Academic All-Ohio team. Junior James Farrow. He'll be here. We were too quick for him. Yes. Sophomore Nick Kozlowski.
Very proud of
Nick was named to the All-Regional team, and he was also Academic All-Ohio this year. Senior Alex Murray. Sophomore Ben Nagel. Nope, unfortunately. Senior Tommy Odo. Tommy was also part of the Academic All-Ohio team. Sophomore Jake Penske. Nope. Freshman Dominic Rico. Freshman Cam Rigsby. Freshman Cole Rigsby. Senior Marshall Stewart. John Marshall. And junior Nate Warner. Again, thank you to everyone who supported them throughout the year. Congratulations, gentlemen, on a great season. You represented us very well again. Thank you.
At this point, we'll take a brief break in case any of our student athletes have programs, homework to do, and so on, but you're welcome to stay and join us for the rest of the meeting as well, if you'd like. But otherwise, thank you.
Thank you. Madam President and members of the board, at this time, Mr. Lynch and I will be giving a presentation on measuring student success. Good evening again. I'm joined by Mr. Mike Lynch tonight as we take a look at some measures of success and some outcomes of the instructional shifts we have made in our district the past few years. These changes come in large part as a result of hearing from colleges and universities, as well as businesses and companies who can employ our students, and even from the branches of military. All of these critically important entities indicate that the students we are educating today must leave the 12th grade with more than just the traditional book knowledge. Today's students must graduate with the ability to compete in a global economy with essential skills such as the ability to research and communicate using multiple tools and platforms. They need to know how to collaborate in order to solve problems, create solutions, and provide creative new ideas. Our students need to exhibit grit, endurance, perseverance, particularly in response to challenges or failure. If our students demonstrate these skills, they will be prepared to succeed in a rapidly changing society. Mentor Public Schools has made a commitment to getting our students ready in a way never before needed. We have made a commitment to innovation and technology, which has been accelerated by the district being awarded a State of Ohio Straight A grant for the 2015 fiscal year in the amount of $12.1 million for our district. The previous year, we applied for a grant and discovered we came close to earning one. However, we learned through the process that we would have had a better chance if we had a partner district to influence even more students, and we would have outside researchers help us to measure some of our initiatives. In reapplying a year later, we partnered with neighboring Kirtland schools and added the research component, which allowed us to finally earn the grant. As we enter the 2018 fiscal year, it's a good time to look at some of the data to see what some of our shifts have been and the impact that it's had. But let me preface this by saying there are multiple lenses we could look through. Several years ago, schools around the state based success on one set of test scores from the state of Ohio. Today, it is important to use multiple measures, a sampling of which we will share tonight. We will take a look at some feedback from two researchers, Dr. June Ahn and Dr. Andrew McKecken, both professors from East Coast universities who interviewed, observed, and reported back over a 3-year period at Mentor High School. We'll also look at a survey tool called Bright Bites, which we have used with students, teachers, and parents since 2014 to collect and track data about teaching and learning with regard to classroom practices, access to technology, skills, and learning environment.
During the first 2 years of the straight A grants, we had a committee that was called our grant implementation team. And our grant implementation team used this chart as our guiding document whenever we met bi-weekly the first year, once a month the second year. We always returned to this chart as our guide of what we were trying to accomplish. And so taking a look at this, Mr. Porter mentioned the 12.1 million. Overall, it was a 13.8 million grant total. 1.7 million went to the Kirtland schools, and then the 12.1 million mentioned by Mr. Porter went to here to the Mentor schools. But that was our large input at that time. But there were other goals that our committee was trying to focus in on, and those were mentioned in those inputs of looking at online courses and bringing back some choices for our students through those electives, remodeled classrooms. The first year, we remodeled 61 classrooms. Since we have an additional 12 classrooms completed, so we're up to 73 of the high school classrooms completed, including world language classrooms. We also have looked at learning spaces, the hub, which was our first renovation, and the digital learning labs, as well as using money last year that was not directly correlated to the grant, but realized through grant savings. We were also able to remodel the student center, as well as ongoing computers for our Mentor High School students. All of those then moved to the activities that were involved. And I'm not going to read over every item on this chart, but you can see the activities, the audiences, the outputs, and drivers all focus in on our students and our teachers and focus in how we are using our technology and the professional learning that went around the use of that technology. So then looking at our outcomes, which Mr. Porter is going to go over shortly with the rest of the charts and the graphs that have been shared with us through our grant evaluators, we were looking at self-regulated learning, teacher shifts in the instructional perception of blended or balanced learning, taking a look overall at our student achievement, and then also looking at grades, PSAT, ACT, as well as state test scores. I will caution you with regards to the state test scores, one of our challenges looking at state test scores is we haven't had a consistent measure over the last 4 years. 4 years back, we look at the OGT, which essentially was phased out. We went to PARC for a year, which the state proved that that wasn't efficient, and now we are on to AIR test. So it's a challenge when you look at state assessments over a 4-year time frame that aren't consistent. I will tell you that as we always look at those state assessments, as Mr. Porter mentioned, as one measure, those state assessments, when you look, we've seen growth in areas. We've also seen some slight declines. It's about a 50-50 balance, and it hasn't given us consistent data yet. And so we're hoping, as anyone will say 3 years is really, that's what you need in order to look at trends. And we'll have our 3rd year of error assessments at the end of this school year. So we hope to have some better measures from state assessments. Mr. Porter will still, though, share with you some other measures related to ACT scores as well as some AP data for our school district. And he'll share that with you shortly. And then always it comes down to that last column, which is what is the impact? The strategic impact. And we're looking at our students. What does it impact on our students in creating lifelong learners? And so there's been a major shift in the way we're trying to make a major shift in the way we instruct our students. And it's no longer that stand and deliver model of education. We want our kids really to focus in on the 4 C's, giving them opportunities to collaborate with each other, giving them opportunities to have communication, not just with their peers, but other adults, not just in their classroom or in their school, but outside to the community as well, and really allowing them to be creative. And so we've done a lot of professional learning around those ideas, and we've seen some great things from our students, but it's an ongoing process. And as Mr. Porter mentioned in his opening, that is our focus, is how are we preparing these kids for beyond Mentor schools. The other strategic impact is we're looking at the teacher shifts in instruction, as well as providing students diversified pathways. And Mr. Porter will talk a little bit briefly about that as we get back to the data.
Thank you. We have recognized the importance of students having a balance of approaches and experiences in order to truly prepare them. As a result, our teachers have received tremendous professional development the past few years to help with the best practices of classroom instruction. This includes research and strategies for small group design, learning stations, and the best ways to implement technology, not just for technology's sake, but to maximize learning for each student. I want to carefully note that we recognize we need to always be aware when technology is best used and when it may not be best used in terms of students' learning. This idea has been termed blended learning. We have begun to use actually the term balanced learning to emphasize the importance of striking that balance in the skills, knowledge, experiences that are presented to our students. We want them to be ready for a variety of what they may experience and need beyond grade 12. So as part of our Straight A grant, our researchers defined 3 profiles of teachers relative to using balanced learning approaches. Profile A, that teacher fully buys into balanced learning by incorporating changes in classroom design and technology. Instruction is student-centered, and technology is a tool that enhances student learning. For the Profile B teacher, these teachers have made significant progress toward implementing a variety of strategies, while sometimes relying on the more traditional approaches. And in Profile C, the teacher has really not attempted many of the balanced learning techniques and leans heavily on direct instruction as a method. This slide demonstrates the shift of instructional techniques our high school teachers have made in just those 3 years, based on the researchers' observations, based on their walkthrough data, and the interviews that they've conducted with students and staff. You can see the biggest change has probably occurred in the percentage of teachers who are originally very comfortable with direct instruction and have now begun to implement many different techniques, largely to help with one of our major goals, which is increasing student engagement with learning. Speaking of engagement, even the physical act of setting up the high school classrooms has changed dramatically in just the last 3 years, as our rooms have more variety of furniture and flexible use of space so students can find what works actually best for their own learning. And the collaboration with classmates can more readily take place. Actually, many adults from the outside who have toured our classes have remarked how our spaces resemble the new workspace designs in corporate America. You can see from this slide how the highest classroom engagement happens when students are organized to work in small groups, and conversely, the least amount of engagement happens when students are in more traditional rows. Engagement by device use. Research also supports higher engagement when technology devices are in use. This slide supports the value of our one-to-one initiative. Also, it's important to note that our researchers did not give students credit for being engaged if they were using their devices for something that wasn't on task or relevant to the work assigned. They were careful to make that distinction. ACT scores. So how do some of these instructional shifts we're talking about and our focus on students being engaged all translate over to performance? One measure, and I want to caution that, it's simply one measure, but it's a universally understood one that has stood the test of time, is the ACT test. This slide shows Mentor High's average ACT scores increasing over the last 4 years. Another sign of progress would be the number of students taking advanced placement tests and the number of tests they have taken. Despite our enrollment in the high school continuing to gradually go down over time, The AP numbers have actually increased a lot in the last 6 years, particularly you can see in the last 2 years. Now it's getting a little harder to see, a little smaller. Advanced placement at Mentor High School, as far as scholars go, better yet, the number of AP scholars at the high school has surged back up these past few years, far exceeding the state average, which I believe is in red. To be a scholar, a student has to earn a 3 or higher on 3 or more of the AP exams, and those AP exams range from 1 through 5. Bright Bites. The other data I mentioned before that we'll take a look at tonight is the Bright Bites survey from students, teachers, and parents that were surveyed, and that's measured either once or twice annually. At the high school, 3 of the last 4 data points that you see have revealed that we are technologically advanced with still some room to grow until we are exemplary. Since the Bright Bites survey range covers grades 3 through 12, too, we can see that the last 4 data points with that wider grade band reflects the same technology advancement. On the teacher side, among our teaching staff, a combined 83% feel comfortable or very comfortable managing classrooms with technology. And another interesting stat, 98% of teachers find our internet speed in the district to be average or better, with 81% indicating it's better than average. And I can tell you, it's not like that a lot of other places. And that's good to know. If we've turned to technology, it needs to be reliable. More teacher perceptions. On this graph, you can see from 2014 to 2017, the teacher's view of students engaging much more with technology as a learning tool. So you can see that difference. If we look, and this slide's a little harder also to see, but student perceptions. So with the student reliance on cell phones and internet, we know that's our reality. One of the things we accept as our responsibility is to continue to promote responsible use among our students. This chart shows how influential parents and guardians are, as well as educators, for students using technology the way it was intended. Through advisory periods, guest presenters, and even some of the device boot camps that have been held at the beginning of the year, we do target lifelong digital citizenship for our students. More student perceptions. This chart shows how closely students and their teachers, from the 2 slides before, perceive their increased use of technology. This slide is actually almost identical to the teacher slide, covering the same time frame. Parent perceptions. When parents responded to the survey, we can see 80% see value in the use of technology in the classroom, with only 8% saying they do not. And you can see here that 95% of parents surveyed acknowledge that we use technology frequently for teaching and learning. Only 1% actually thinks otherwise. And this has sort of a mix in it. In this final slide, including feedback from all the schools, again, a Bright Bites slide, questions run the gamut from collaboration to writing to problem solving to assessments to digital citizenship, and also even a question on assistive technology. This kind of information is great feedback to know our strengths and what needs to improve. I like that 70% of our students are collaborating online for assignments with classmates. On the flip side, there's room for improvement with our total amount of digital citizenship attention, even though, as you saw earlier, we are taking some positive steps. And as a former English teacher, I'd love to see the online writing ramp up. With the overall mix of data that we just shared this evening, I wanted to provide, these are just quick snapshots of all the different measures that exist, particularly some related to our grant. So much has changed so rapidly in schools and in education. To ensure students are achieving, and we are preparing students for a different world than the one we were educated in, we need to take careful accounting of what is going well and what warrants improvement. We hope that was helpful, and Mike and I are certainly glad to answer any questions that you may have.
have a question. How did Bright Bites find the people? I mean, was it a voluntary survey, or how did they find their respondents?
Great question. So we, first of all, that Bright Bites data, we only use it when it is statistically significant. So there is a number that Bright Bites give us. So we have to reach a certain criteria with our students, our teachers, and our parents before we're even able to report the data. And so they're very, that mindset of making sure it's scientific behind it. And so your question about how do we get it out to all of those stakeholders. With students, for instance, at our high school, we'll oftentimes, depending on the year, we'll have them give it to all of the students in their ELA classes. So our student, the student responses in there is very high. Our teachers, we will send that out, principals, district principals will send that out to their staff and ask them to complete. For parents, we'll send that out through Infinite Campus and ask them to give us feedback. And again, you're looking at 40 for even parent bases. Parents is not as high as a percentage for statistical significance, but staff and students, you're looking at over a 50% return of all of those staff and students taking it before it becomes statistically significant. So we'll use different forms of technology to get it out there to make sure we have statistical significance. One point I would like to also make, you saw that yellow drop last year on both the high school slide and the elementary slide. One of the largest reasons that is because we did not reach a statistical significance at our high school, and so much of that data wasn't even reported and included in that report. And that's why we gave the high school one again this past October.
I was just worried that, I mean, I was a teacher, I'm sorry for my verbiage, but the good kids would respond.
No.
And you know, you would
No,
get a
we actually,
percentage that
students is a great turnout. In grades 3 through 12, we're looking at high 90% of students who are responding to that. So
Okay,
thank you
thank
for the question.
In that initial part that wasn't the Bright Bites, were you looking with the grant implementation team, was that really the high school, so our 9 through 12 students?
Yep, great point. So the first part of that presentation was all pretty much, that was all 9 through 12, and that was our grant evaluators focus. The second part, that is included in our grant evaluation, but we do that for grades 3 through 12, and we've been doing that since 2014. And we will continue to gather that same data. There are over 200 data points in that Bright Bites that are received based on parent, student, and staff feedback. So it's great data that we can look at and dig deeper into the strengths and, just as Mr. Porter mentioned, the weaknesses, things we know digital citizenship as a district, we need to make that more of our focus and get better in that area. And so we're trying to put some things in place to support digital citizenship K through 12.
And I think a common challenge to any data or change in education comes from traditionalists, if we want to call kind of folks who prefer what was, and who look at the technology as being kind of flash and mirrors rather than substance. So I liked, the ACT is a wonderful measure for our high school kids. What kinds of measures can we look at to assess the validity and the efficacy of all of the different strategies that have been implemented K through 8?
So let me try to understand your question to make sure I understand it. So when you talk about, are you talking about our implementation of, let's say, technology one-to-one?
Technology, and it's probably even broader than that, because we've gone, we're shifting away from textbooks and doing more teacher-created material, so that we have a lot of moving parts. So, and I recognize that's got to
Sure.
be very challenging, but so that we can know that once we've, kind of
Sure.
gotten that learning curve over,
Yep.
are we seeing growth and
Yep.
improvement, so that we're doing at least as well as we did under
Sure.
the traditional method?
Okay, so now that I understand your question, so our district level, we have a DLT that meets 3 times a year. I think actually, I'll look at Ms. Bonas to confirm, but I think we're going to certainly invite the board to our next, one of our DLT sessions this year, so that we look at so much data in that district level team, whether it's from our STAR reports to, we look at a measure at our middle school and our high school looking at how project-based learning is being implemented. There is so much data that we look at, our Lexia scores. We look at Newsella, which is a nonfiction, as well as Achieve 3000, which we use in our elementary and our middle school. So we look at all of those measures, and we're constantly looking at that data to see what changes that we are implementing, how is that having an impact on learning. And so I think that's an ongoing thing that as Barb, being our leader of our DLT, has really put into place over the last 3 years to really drive home that we have to look at data and make sure that our changes have data to back that up. And again, as Mr. Porter mentioned, and I will certainly, jump on that, is that we can't just use one measure. Our state assessments are one measure, and I think they're important, but it is only one measure. If we just use that one measure, I think we're doing a disservice to our students, because I think there's so many other things that we need to be looking at besides state assessments.
And there's that other affective piece, measuring how much students like it. That even if there isn't a change in statistical pieces,
Sure.
the fact that a child comes to school, whatever age they are, and they like to be there.
Yeah.
It feels like a place that they want to be and learn.
Right, and I think we would all agree, we are a very high-performing district. We want to make sure that we maintain that high performance, but I think there are also opportunities for us, for our students, to get them re-engaged in the learning process, to really like that idea of coming to school, like you just mentioned. And I hope some of the strategies and some of the professional learning that we've been offering our staff through project, problem-based learning, those types of things, giving students some choice of what they're learning about and how they're learning, I think will hopefully get them re-engaged in that process.
To tag on to that, I would be interested to know if we've been looking at attendance and if we've seen any changes in that area.
It's a great point. I think that our DLTs, that's certainly something that we can look at. But I think, again, long-standing change, looking at a long-term, I think that's a great idea, and that's something that we can easily get from Infinite Campus, so.
I think that might be one way to measure what you were just talking about.
Do they
is
feel
getting the
good being
kids
there?
So
come
one
to
of the
school and
things too with
engage.
attendance that I think played a role, will play a role this year, and it's early yet, so it'll have to bear itself out. There are much stricter attendance rules that
true.
have come into play. So it'll be interesting to see, attendance can be impacted by that, and attendance can be impacted by satisfaction with school. I was going to mention too, every 3 years, for at least the duration that I've been here and maybe longer, we have run the Hazelton survey, and there are some, as Mrs. Jessling pointed out, kind of the affective questions are in there. One of the things that has quite frankly caught our attention in the past is there was one year where a higher percentage of surveys than we expected came back with students weren't satisfied with school. And that was several years ago, but it caught our attention in a way that we built some goals around some of that data to try to reverse that and become better than the national trend in that, because and one of the ways we've tried to do that is through the student engagement that, again, we've talked about tonight. When our students are in our classrooms, we want them to be interested and curious with school. We want them to want to be there. And if they're engaged, we think their satisfaction also will go up. So,
One thing I just want to mention on top of that, I don't know how to measure this, and I would love to find out a way, but if you look at our kindergartners and our elementary students and their passion and their love for coming into school, I think is unfortunately for a lot of our kids, not all of them, because there are some seniors that love but I think they start to, over that time, they lose that drive of wanting to come to school. And I think however we can measure that and try to reverse that and see a change in that losing interest in going to school as you get older, if we could start to reverse that, I think we're going to be very successful. And we'll continue to try to find ways to measure that and try to find ways to change it as well.
There was one more piece of, I know when we accepted the straight A grant, one thing was there had to be one class or some digital online component, and there's a lot of mixed reports just nationally on the efficacy of that for
Sure.
students. What has been our take on that?
So online learning, I think there's a lot of different ways that kids can learn online. What we believe the best way is when our teachers are the ones creating the courses and our students are taking those courses, but also having an attachment to that teacher that created that course in the perfect scenario, because that teacher still invested in it. And so meeting with that student maybe weekly, of touching base with them, whether through email, through meetings and those types of things, that's when we think it works well. We also have online health, which I think is what you're referring to. Having Ms. Forgione, who leads our online health over the last couple of years, she has done a phenomenal job leading that course and connecting with kids and helping them be successful and implementing other pieces to the course, so it's not just strictly online, that there's some hands-on pieces as well. She is actually one of our teachers going through the process this year of writing her own online course for health. So we will no longer be reliant on APEX, which is where we currently get our health curriculum. Going into next year, we will use Ms. Forgione's self-created online health course to address that. And that's where we think it is the best. Now, again, we couldn't do that 3 years ago when we started with this grant because of all the other changes. We needed time to do that. But by the end of this year, we will have 14 semester courses that were written by our own teachers being implemented at Mentor High School. And those include the ELAs, the social studies, we have sociology, the health course, so all of those being semester courses for our students.
That's exciting. And the last piece is our teachers have done an incredible job of making a leap, because probably the vast majority of our faculty didn't learn how to do these things in college. So what kinds of supports are we offering them to make those changes and not feel
Sure,
overwhelmed?
Absolutely. I can't stand up here and say enough how amazing our teaching staff is and mentored. The amount of changes that we have put out there over the last 5 years is unbelievable, but what persistence that they have gone through this process with has been fantastic. The ongoing supports, I would put our district against any district in this country as far as the quality professional learning that we offer to our staff. At times, it feels like our staff is pulled out a lot, but the professional learning opportunities that we offer our staff, I would compare it to anywhere across this country. And so through that ongoing professional learning, on top of having 16 amazing instructional coaches, I call them the energy behind every initiative in our district. They are the ones working with those teachers hand in hand through every change that we have made. And so those instructional coaches and that high-quality professional learning, no doubt, will continue to give our teachers hopefully the support that they need for individual needs as well as group needs as we continue to go through these changes.
I wanted to add to that I think, and kudos to the curriculum department, for so many of the initiatives, when it requires special training, especially at the front end, even if the coaches have to help to sort of implement it on the scene in the buildings, we are able to bring in a lot of the top teachers, experts in the field to implement. So I want to give kudos to curriculum.
Is it up to each individual teacher? You mentioned ELA as one of the online classes. Is that one that would be tested in an end-of-course exam? Whose responsibility is it to make sure that they align their instruction to the end-of-course
That's a great question.
exams?
And so throughout that whole process, as we've gone through that, we've taken a close look at that to make sure that they're aligned. And that's going to be, that's not going to be immediate data. We're not going to be able to look at year one and say, okay, this was a failure because we only had this amount. Because, again, we have to look at the students that we're pulling in from those courses to make sure we have a large enough sample. But that is certainly going to be data. Throughout the process, working with our department chairs as well as our instructional coaches, making sure that it is aligned. These are teachers that have taught this curriculum, and so it's not an outside person. These are teachers who are also going to still be teaching brick and mortar classes. Our goal would be to have them teaching 3 brick and mortar classes and 2 online classes. And so we hope that that whole process, they can see that immediate alignment as they're going through.
I had another question I forgot. And of course, go on.
I was just going to say kudos to the IT department. The amount of data that is streaming from thousands of devices across the district pretty reliably, from what I can tell. It's never going to be perfect, but it's pretty darn
We had a
good.
rough couple of weeks, just these last 2 weeks, our staff would tell you, but it wasn't Mentor Schools. So we had a couple of rough days, but I think we've become accustomed to not having any issues. And so I agree with you 100%. Our IT department and our network guys keep our network up running strong. If you think about the devices that we've added to our district over these 3 years, and to not have any really major lapses. We have little pockets that we try to address throughout the district, but to not have any major lapses in connectivity is unbelievable.
I remember. So if I teach 3 brick and mortar classes and 2 online classes, am I responsible for the slows and all, for my
Correct.
online
Yep.
students?
Yes.
Do I meet with those online students?
Yes, that's one of the things I kind of mentioned, is that our goal is to really not let these kids just go off. Even, there's a number of reasons, different reasons that a kid could be taking an online course. It could be that they want to try to squeeze another class in. It could be because they're a band student, and that's a difficulty to get their schedule in. It could be that there's health issues or sometimes behavior issues. And so there could be a whole host of reasons that we have kids in those online courses. That's why we wanted to create them, because we really think it offers our kids some choice and some opportunities. And so I think, even though they're in these online courses, the expectation is still that we know success happens when there's a relationship built between student and teacher. And so we have a guideline for our online teachers, a guiding document that says, one of those expectations is you make contact with that student once every week. And so that's a clear expectation. And if that kid is not doing well, we also have steps in place of reaching out and contacting the student, reaching out and contacting the parents, reaching out and working with the school counselor, reaching out and working with the assistant principal. There are steps in place, just like there would be for that brick and mortar student, but we have steps in place that are clearly outlined to hopefully help those kids find success. I will give you one more just piece of information and data with regards to, we ran, it's called CAA, Cardinal Achievement Academy. We've been doing that for the last few years. Our numbers weren't great. I mean, they were very poor. We were looking at some areas, we're looking at, for subject areas, 45 to 50% success rates on that. Our goal, we're working with a lady from Hilliard that kind of gives us support and guidance as we go through this process. They have an over 93% success rate. Hilliard has been doing this for 11 years. They have over 75 online courses. They have a 93% success rate for their students taking online courses. I put that number out there. I would love to see that our first year. We're not going to get there, but it's going to take us time. But I can guarantee it's going to be better than the 45 to 50% that we were seeing with the CAA.
Not to say that you were wrong, but the Cardinal Achievement Academy was there when I was still working, and the percentages were a lot higher than 45 or 50% when we first
I'm
started.
giving you exact data. I could pull out the data for you that we have had in the last 3 years.
Oh,
Our
well, this
courses,
was- that was
45 to
6 years
50%.
ago.
Again,
Yeah.
it may have been successful at a time.
Yeah.
Our current measures is it's not.
Oh, I believe you. I believe you. I'm not saying you're wrong. I
No,
believe
that's
it.
fine, that's fine. I know like the back of my hand that data,
Mm-hmm.
so.
Excellent.
I would like to thank you for the information. We have gone through a lot of change in the district, and the staff has definitely stepped up, and the board has been looking for data to back up, what the result of all these changes has produced. So this was helpful. I appreciate that. So now that we are wrapping up the Straight A grant, my question is, will we have ways to measure? I like that we are looking at multiple measurements for success, and I
Sure.
agree that the state does not give us reliable measurements.
Right.
We know how that works.
Yep.
So going forward,
Sure. So great question. Appreciate the question. I would say this, is that the Straight A grant has given us an opportunity to have outside evaluators like these two. But ultimately, a lot of this data was collected by inside individuals as well, between assistant principals that have gone around and done extra walkthroughs based on this walkthrough data that we are collecting for this. And so we can continue those processes. The Bright Bites data is going to be something that we continue to use district-wide. Really, it takes a while when you start to even dig into this Bright Bites data, and over 200. We've had access to it, but we're really just starting to get our principals and our administrators comfortable with it. We had a meeting with all of our department chairs at the high school yesterday afternoon, and we had someone on from Bright Bites sharing some of the information, this information with them. And again, I can only say that at the end, I think it's overwhelming to start to look at some of this data and as you start to get through it. And I can say that because at the end, I think I saw the glassy looks and there were not a lot of questions because I think everyone was still just kind of processing through looking at all this information. But again, even as we speak from the folks at Bright Bites, and this Bright Bites is around the country as far as the information and how it's used, but they are so complimentary of the success. We had a beginning, and it was on one of Mr. Porter's first slides, the overall number taking in all 200 was at 1,053. And so it was just starting to approach, just leaving that beginning stages and starting to hit proficient. We moved that up over the last 3 years, over an average of 11 to 1103 was our last score. So that growth, they said, is unseen in so many of their districts. And so they're so complimentary. And I think they passed that on to our department chairs yesterday as they met with them. So we will continue to collect that data, and we'd be more than happy. It might be a nice annual thing that we could do after that to do a report here to the board to share with you. Bright Bites, it won't be the last time that you hear that. We can continue to give that information to you as well.
I love the fact that, at least for our start, we had an outside, it gives us a chance to give an honest look at everything without any angst. It's happening in spite of us. And I think that honest appraisal is the key to success for our kids. You can massage numbers, but the bottom line is, are we doing right by them? Is what our community is trusting our schools to do happening for the children that we serve. And so I'm very excited.
Yeah, and I think that's so well said in looking at, we didn't want to just share with you Dr. Junon and Andrew McKechnie's, viewpoint of our district. I think the Bright Bites data backs up a lot of the things that we've been trying to accomplish through that grant. So we will continue to pass that along to you guys.
And there's still things to improve.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Anybody else have questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Righty.
Madam President and members of the board, I am recommending approval of revised policies 1.11, 6.08, 6.45, and 7.14.
So moved.
Second.
Before we vote, I wanted to ask about a clarification of revised policy 1.11. We've outlined a protocol for setting additional meetings where either an emergency meeting, a work session, or executive sessions. And the way we're wording it is that all board members would receive contact, and then in response to that would be a verbal or written response from the board member. If we don't modify this to add a what-if kind of scenario.
Well, first of all, most of that came right from the board policy. I only added the last sentence of each one.
Correct.
And you brought this up the other day, and a little bit of it should be inferred that if you're going out of the country or whatever, but it should have been inferred that everyone should have been notified of a special meeting to begin with. So maybe we could just put 3 to 5 attempts to notify them, or that a board member has to allow the treasurer's office when they're going to be on a cruise or out of the country and non-communicative.
Unavailable. I think some expectation for what would happen maybe from the treasurer's office for the contact to be made, and then if response cannot be gotten from all 5, that then what do we do?
I would also like to say that the treasurer's office is in this, the new part of the board policy, that no, it was never stated before who was to make the notification. And just so everybody knows, there was a June 6th meeting of the Board of Education, and I was not notified of it, and I was very upset. At that point in time, the treasurer's office was not part of the board policy. And when I wrote the sentence after each of the paragraphs for the special meeting, the executive session, whatever the 3 meetings are, Mr. Wilson suggested that the treasurer's office take that on because he is the secretary for the board. But before tonight, the treasurer's office would not have been was not part of that board policy.
The contact was made via email, but I understand that you didn't receive it. So I think just some clarification as to what do we do.
I just want to clarify.
Sure.
You knew exactly where I was, and before I left, I told you my niece just moved into her house, and I didn't know if I was going to have Wi-Fi. So a phone call would have been nice. Okay? You can
Understood.
change it how you want to change it.
No, I apologize for the fact that
Based
you
on
didn't
what I
receive.
heard, I've been writing a note here. Would it capture everyone's thought? And I heard 3 to 5, so I'll leave the number blank. Adding a second sentence in the new part that says, if no response is received after blank contacts, the meeting shall proceed as called. And then another sentence, board members should notify the treasurer's office if they anticipate not being available for an extended time.
I think that makes good sense, just
I
so that
agree.
we could have a meeting.
I think we need to decide if it's 3 to 5 so we can vote on it tonight.
Yes.
Well, I think that if we can postpone the meeting, that would be our first option. In a situation like what happened then, it was a dire situation.
That's
So
true.
we
That's
didn't
true.
have a choice. I agree with you, Sally. Every attempt should have been made to contact you. I think we've learned from this mistake. But if there's an option to reschedule, that was a tight time frame. We were not able to do that. But I also think that all board members should let the treasurer's office and the superintendent's office know if we're going to be out of town, whether we're reachable or not, which I have always made a practice of doing that.
Sounds good.
Is there a number of contacts that's the right number to include? Attempted contacts?
And you should both have all contact information, cell phones,
Yes, we do have
and in the event that
mobile
we're not
phones
available.
and emails and other phone numbers.
What do you think, 3? Email, phone, text, that's 3.
3?
Yeah, just if one of each of those types would be fine.
All right, if I may read it again then, if no response is received after the 3rd contact, the meeting shall proceed as called. Board members should notify the treasurer's office and superintendent's office if they anticipate not being available for an extended time.
Contact or communication? Contact indicates you've communicated positively, right? So wouldn't it be just communication
Third.
sent?
3rd communication,
Does that sound right?
okay. Now, if no response is received after the 3rd communication, the meeting shall proceed as called. Board members should notify the treasurer's office and superintendent's office if they anticipate not being available for an extended time. And we would add that to each of the 3.
I'm sorry, could you read that again?
Sure. If no response is received after the 3rd communication, the board meeting shall proceed as called. Board members should notify the treasurer's office and the superintendent's office if they anticipate not being available for an extended time.
That's fine. Thank
So
you.
we're assuming that part of that responsibility is, let's say I am going on vacation for a week, I would let Dan's office and Bill's office know I'll be out of town for a week. If you need to reach me, please contact me by phone, as I may not have internet access.
Or even like when I was out of the country,
Exactly.
I can't.
You won't be reachable.
Uh-uh.
So in an event where you're not reachable, the board would have to decide, is this something that can wait until that person can get back?
Correct.
And if not, we have to proceed.
Exactly. I just didn't want to leave it this way, because this would say we couldn't call any of those meetings.
Right, well, it should be clear.
Yeah, okay,
And communication is key.
absolutely.
Does that make sense? Everybody on board with that?
Yeah, I think that sounds good, Chris.
Thank you.
All righty.
All right, and
So-
procedurally, we have a proposed amendment. We should have a motion and a second to approve the amendment, and then go back to the main motion as amended.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And now we can call the roll.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Mrs. Briner?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes?
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Ms. Jisling?
Yes.
All right, now a vote on the main motion
For the other policies
for
include.
all of those, and this one as amended.
No, this is only for the second reading, and then you were
Correct.
going to refer back for the first reading on a
Yes.
separate. Okay. So regarding the remaining revised policies, 6.08, 6.45, 7.14, second reading, we need to vote.
So moved.
Oh, we have a
Call the roll.
motion
We
and
already
a
moved.
second now. So, Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes?
Mrs. Briner? Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Ms. Jisling?
Yes.
And we did prepare an addendum tonight for a first reading on policy 8.18, titled Procurement with Federal Grants Funds. This is a revision to our existing policy and comes about because of a change at the federal level for policies. This is one of the ones where you have to have a policy and it has to say certain things. It's not something totally at our discretion. And there's 4 components to when we're using federal funds to procure items that, in addition to state bidding laws, there's something they label micro purchases, that there are federal regulations. Our auditors indicated that the federal government imposed this a year ago, but also added a temporary suspension to give local governments time to make the adjustments. That temporary suspension's about ready to expire. So I apologize, it comes in the form of an addendum, but if we can conduct a first reading tonight, we'll bring it back for a second reading and adoption next month.
Is this more or less what it needs to be?
Yes, our attorneys have worked with it and have advised us, and we've shared it with the auditors, who also agree that it will bring us in full compliance with the new federal regulations.
Excellent. We have a motion for a first reading? Oh, I'm sorry, we don't have to do it.
No,
Never
no.
mind, sorry. Okay, and moving on, back to you, Mr. Porter.
Thank you. Madam President and members of the board, I am recommending approval of agenda item C1 related to certified staff, and C2 through C4 all related to human resource matters.
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Wilson, will you call the roll?
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes?
Mrs. Briner?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Ms. Jisling?
Yes.
Thank you. This concludes my portion of the agenda.
Thank you very much. And to the business side of things, Mr. Wilson, I believe we are.
Yes, at the board's request, we have prepared a resolution that has 3 parts to it to amend the current interim superintendent agreement to enter into a new 1-year interim superintendent agreement to begin August 1st of 2018 through July 31st of 2019, and to also amend a 2-year assistant superintendent contract that was approved in June of 17 to modify it to be a 3-year contract in the event that that contract comes back into play. So this is according to the discussions the board had and reflects the understanding you have with Mr. Porter.
That's good. So, motion?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Wilson, will you call the roll?
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Mrs. Briner?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Ms. Jisling?
Yes.
And next, it's that time of year. The Ohio Revised Code requires each Board of Education to conduct an organizational meeting and reconstitute themselves sometime between January 1st and January 15th of each calendar year. We're asking that for that meeting, the board appoint a president pro tem to preside until a president is elected at the organizational meeting.
I'd like to nominate Mrs. Briner for that position.
Second.
And Mr. Wilson, will you call the roll?
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. Briner?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Ms. Jisling?
Yes.
And then as a companion to that, we're requesting that the Board of Education formally set January 9, 2018 for 3 meetings running consecutively. The organizational meeting at 6:30, the state-required tax budget hearing at 6:45, and then move into our regular meeting at 7 p.m. So I ask your approval to set that as a meeting date and to advertise it.
So moved.
Second.
And Mr. Wilson, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Briner?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Ms. Jisling?
Yes. And to Mr. Tuttle for the legislative report.
Thank you very much. So it's a one-page report I've issued, but most importantly, it's House Bill 200. I spoke about this a month ago and even a month before that, and that's regarding the voucher program. It's called the Ohio Opportunity Scholarship Voucher Program. If they have not already gone into recess, they will be going into recess, our state representatives. So I ask my fellow board members, administrators, and all those in attendance, please contact our state reps, John Rogers, Ron Young, and voice your opinion. If you get a chance to record it, great. If you get a chance to talk to him, ask him their position on that. Please do it. It's very important.
State Senator Yuko also.
Yeah, they will go to the Senate after it's at the House. You're right. John Eklund. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tuttle. And Chief Financial Officer's report and recommendations, Mr. Wilson,
Yes,
please.
I recommend the Board of Education approve the consent agenda for items 7A through 7G.
So moved.
Second.
And I would only remark that November was a normal month financially, performance as expected, nothing out of the ordinary in the other agenda items.
Very good. And Mr. Wilson, will you call the roll?
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Briner?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Ms. Jisling?
Yes. Is there any unfinished business anybody has? All righty. And new business?
Good evening yet again. We have 2 very special recognitions tonight with some gifts. The gifts we have tonight were prepared by students in Mr. Brian Banks' class at Ridge Middle School in a 3D printer engraver. The students were honored to be able to create these for 2 of our departing board members as a memory of your service to our district. Tonight, we want to first recognize and thank Ms. Sally Miller for her service as a Board of Education member from 2013 to 2017. She also served as president of the board in the 2016 calendar year and as vice president in 2015. During her tenure, the district made significant advancements in innovation and technology, and she helped to ensure that programming and outcomes that accompanied these shifts would benefit students now and into their futures. Sally has given many years of service to our district as a teacher of both business and math at Mentor High School, Ridge Middle School and Shore Middle School. She then entered administration and from 1998 to 2000 was the assistant principal at Ridge Middle School. At that point, Sally returned to the high school and served as one of the unit principals until her retirement in 2011. Then, just 2 years later, she was elected to the Board of Education, where she has served us since. Whatever role she has been in, Sally has been an advocate for students and has especially been a champion for those who have needed extra help. For all you have done for our students, families, and our district, we sincerely thank you for your service.
Say that the 1 year I was away from Mentor Schools, it was not a good year, so I don't know what I'm going to do. I've been with Mentor Schools since 1979. So the 1 year I was home and retired, it was not a good year. It was not good for Sally. But thank you so much. Thank you.
Congratulations, Sally.
Thank you,
for everything.
thank you, thank you. Oh, my goodness, I feel like I don't know. Thanks, thank you.
Now I have the honor to say a few words about Bill Shaw. Bill was already an engaged citizen as he supported his 4 daughters as they progressed through our school district. He and Denise are proud parents of 4 Mentor grads, Aaron in 2006, Elisa in 2010, Megan in 2012, and Rebecca in 2013. Bill began his most active engagement with the schools when we first entered fiscal crisis, and he was designated to serve on the State Fiscal Planning and Supervision Commission as the parent representative. This was in March of 2004. Bill then volunteered and was appointed to the Board of Education on August 9, 2004 to fill a vacant position. Bill served as Vice President of the Board in 2005, 2008, and 2012, and served as President in 2006, 2009, and 2013. Bill is the longest serving of our current board members with over 12 and a half years of service. Bill's volunteered to become part of the solution during the unexpected fiscal crisis, knowing that his engagement would be all hard work and no glory. The school district benefited from the second fastest recovery from fiscal emergency in the state of Ohio's history. This was accomplished with Bill's support and assistance in passing a levy in 2004 that stabilized our financial position, and then also pursuing support and assistance in our first new levy request 12 years later, the spring of 2016. Bill brought his significant background and experience in public sector management to the Board of Education and provided a new dimension to the board's support of the community. He's demonstrated devotion in ensuring that the community's students receive the highest possible quality education. His time on the board is a classic example of leaving a place better than you found it. On behalf of all the board members who served with you, our past, current, and future students that benefit from your service, all the faculty and staff, all of our communities, we recognize and commend you for your distinguished service.
Never at a loss for words. You know, there's a saying, it takes a village to raise a child, and certainly the Village of Mentor does an excellent job of that. You know, there's not enough time to thank everyone. I'd probably leave somebody off the list, but I do want to break that village down into a few groups. Number one, the voters. I do thank the voters for giving me 3 terms in office and giving me the opportunity to serve the community. It's been very rewarding personally and professionally, and I thank you for that. The leadership of the district, Dr. Hoynes, Mr. Miller, and now Mr. Porter, we've all seen the results, and I feel very comfortable that we are in excellent hands going into the future with Mr. Porter. Mr. Wilson, my goodness, 13 years, we've had over pretty close to $1 billion pass through our hands to manage. And think about that, $1 billion, that's a lot of money. But I can tell you that Dan Wilson is the best financial officer for schools in the state. You can tell Lowell Davis I said so. Yeah, but you made the job very easy, Dan. Your expertise, your ability to explain complex issues made this job very, very easy for all of us, and we appreciate that greatly. My fellow board members, Mrs. Corbin, Mr. Cicero, Mr. Sparacia, Mr. Mihawk, Mrs. Briner, Mr. Tuttle, Mr. Miller, Ms. Jessling. We made sure over all the years to focus on student outcome, student success. And as we've seen in some other districts in the area, they can get rather divisive and things can get rather messy. While we didn't always agree on everything, when we came out here, it was a united front because we knew that was what was necessary and what was in the best interest of the children of the district. And for that, I'm very thankful for, and as is the community, I'm sure. The students, I want to thank our students. You know, I've had the opportunity and really a blessing to participate in the graduation ceremony for pretty close to 10,000 students over the 13 years. You know, a lot of people, and I'm going to say I'm old because I am, they're not very nice to some of the younger generations, and they say, boy, you know, we're in a lot of trouble, this is going to be awful. I don't feel that way. I feel, quite frankly, I'm going to be well taken care of, even if it's only just by the Mentor students, because we have students, they amaze me. They absolutely amaze me. By the time they're graduating, they've won all kinds of awards. I remember one year, I don't remember the young lady's name. She was a published author. She had written a children's book. It's amazing is all I can say. So that the students, boy, keep up the great work because you're an exceptional group of individuals in this community. And lastly, of course, they couldn't be the excellent students without the teaching staff, without the transportation department, food service, facility maintenance group, clerical staff, central office. I'm probably leaving somebody off the list. That group really makes that impact. And we've asked a lot of that group. We had some very hard times. And they were very cooperative during those hard times. We didn't get through that fiscal crisis on our own. It was a cooperative effort between the staff and the community. They accepted a lot of change and have worked through that and risen up to levels I don't even think we could imagine the levels where we are. And I only see us going higher. It's fantastic. They've done it with professionalism, creativity, and innovation. And that's just phenomenal. As a district, we've been faced with some difficult times, some difficult decisions. We've made some mistakes along the way. We've been able to overcome these challenges with our courage, our innovation, a whole lot of resiliency, and a cooperative spirit that has led us to great successes for our kids. I'm honored and privileged to have shared in this experience, and really all I can say very humbly is thank you and best wishes for a successful future.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, both Mrs. Miller and Mr. Shaw. And finally, our second hearing of the public. Was there anyone who wished to speak either on agenda items or non-agenda items? Oh, please come forward. You can step right up to the podium here if you would just tell us who you are.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jesse Webb. I'm a Mentor resident for about 20 years now, and I have a child in the 8th grade at Ridge. Love the school system, so kudos to all of you. So, however, the reason I came tonight is I'm a small business owner in the Mentor area. I work in the wedding business, and through that, I have a lot of associates and friends that are also in wedding business, including photographers. And I've always told them, one of these days I'm going to go ask how they choose who does photography for the Mentor school pictures, the school pics. Because we have and I'm not a photographer, so I'm not in the running. But I always wonder why we don't support our local businesses, or what's the process? How do they get involved? Because I know of several that have said they would love to be involved, but they get shut out, or I don't know how that happens. I don't know the process, but is that public knowledge? How do you guys do that? What's the process for picking who does the pictures, and how often does that happen, and all that kind of stuff?
Did you want to speak to that, or will?
Yes, and I'm going to say I will follow up if you'll, after the meeting, give me an email address or phone number. There's no set number of years that we go back to the marketplace, but periodically, and I'm recalling 3 or 4 times in my time with the district, we have solicited input, and we balance it against the quality of service, the breadth of the services, and then the price also. There's no specific board policy giving extra weight to local businesses, but yet I think the expectation is if all other things are close to equal, we always want to do that. So I'm more than happy to follow up with more details. I just need to dip my hand in the files to make sure I
understand
don't
that.
say something that's
Right.
not correct.
Okay. So that was my main, not concern, I guess. I just curious because, like I said, over the years, I've developed friendships with photographers, and they're all local in Mentor. I'm a big fan of supporting local businesses, so. And I know they're willing and able, and they're all professional. They're not like mom and pop, fly by night. These are all people that have been in the area for a long time and are willing and able to do a great job. So I would appreciate that if I get some input in that.
As soon as we finish the meeting, I'll come
Okay.
get your contact.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming forward. Appreciate that. Was there anyone else who wished to speak to the board this evening? Okay. And I don't believe we have a plan for any executive session this evening, and therefore, a move to adjourn.
One last time.
And Mr. Wilson, will you call?
was there a
It was
second?
Mrs. Miller.
Okay, one last time for Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. Briner?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Ms. Jisling?
Yes, and thank you again. As I adjourn, we wish a very happy holiday season to our whole community, and enjoy your families, as I know we will as well. We are adjourned.